In 1990, a group in Lexington, Massachusetts founded Looking Glass Studios. And as the years progressed, the little studio created such classics as Ultima Underworld and System Shock. Unfortunately, even with their successes, a series of poor-selling titles and bad internal decisions put the company on thin ice. As Looking Glass fell apart, they canceled a game based on Star Trek Voyager that had already been in development for a year and a half. Frustrated with the problems in the company and thinking they could do better, 3 employees who had worked on Voyager left to found their own studio. At the time, they were playing a hex-based board game that featured underwater horse-to-horse combat. Naturally, they almost named their company Underwater Horse as the ultimate nerd reference. But eventually, Ken Levine, Jonathan Shea, and Robert Fermier settled on Irrational. The 3 founders started Irrational because of their frustration with Looking Glass's design process. Analyzing the mistakes that were made, they developed 3 core principles around which their new studio would be based. They would design a game to fit the available technology, they would involve all members of their staff in the design process, and they would make hard decisions, meet their deadlines, and always keep the design process moving forward. They would never allow themselves to stagnate. Starting out, they wanted to make a game like System Shock, which their old company, Looking Glass, had made. Shopping around their initial designs to publishers, they drew the attention of Electronic Arts. EA liked what they saw and decided that not only would they publish it, but they would give Irrational the license to System Shock. The fledgling company wouldn't be making a game inspired by System Shock, they would be making System Shock 2. To do so, they would work in tandem with the company that they had just left, repurposing the engine that Looking Glass was developing for their new game, Thief. The plus side to this was that they wouldn't have to spend money or manpower on making an engine themselves. The downside was that any bugs or issues they encountered would have to be fixed by the Looking Glass crew, who were more concerned with finishing Thief than helping with System Shock 2. Knowing that they would be on a tight schedule and budget, and adhering to their belief that they should deliver on time and on budget, they decided to develop simple gameplay mechanics that they could leverage in different ways. Even when games like Half-Life released with complex and expensive scripted sequences, the team at Irrational were smart enough to know that they didn't have the resources to mimic Valve's style. Rather, they would simply do what they could do, as well as they could do it. For example, they quickly realized that programming a security camera would be easy, a simple AI with a timed movement. But with this small piece of code, they could create stealth missions where the player must avoid detection,
potential threat detected,
timing missions where the player must memorize the camera's sweep and move accordingly, or exploration missions where the player must find a console to deactivate the cameras. All of this gameplay provided by a simple, inexpensive AI. It was this philosophy, being creative with limited resources, that the company had been founded on. Unfortunately, the tight budget and unknown name meant that Irrational could only hire young, inexperienced developers to work for them. Additionally, the lead programmer, Ken Levine, had never been a lead programmer before. Beyond this, the 3 founders were all game makers and not businessmen, and they found that running their own company was much harder work than they had expected. As such, the guys who had just wanted to make their own titles found themselves dealing with paychecks, insurance, and taxes in addition to their creative duties. For a while, it seemed like they might have been in over their heads. But then in August 1999, System Shock 2 finally released to critical acclaim beyond their wildest hopes.
There's some kind of maintenance access right on this hallway. You can use it to reach Deck 1. You're safe for the time being. You're recovering from the effects of surgery and will be unable to remember any of the events of the last few weeks.
The game mixed elements from multiple genres. Shooter, RPG, horror, and stealth all contributed to the game's unique atmosphere. An atmosphere was one of the game's strongest points, with art aesthetics, level design, and sound all combining to create a world so compelling that it pulled gamers in from the very beginning. Set in a starship infected with bizarre creatures and a malfunctioning AI, System Shock 2 gave players a complex story, varied gameplay, and a dizzying array of power-ups to choose from. Whether you chose to specialize in weapons, tech powers, or psychic powers not only made for different gameplay, but also affected how the player could solve puzzles and advance through missions, giving the single-player game hefty replay value. On top of all this, items degraded and ammo was hard to come by, forcing trigger-happy gamers to think through their actions and plan ahead. The success put the upstart developer on the map as a AAA studio. Their belief in designing within technological constraints and meeting hard deadlines had delivered spectacularly, and they were ready to do it again. Unfortunately, even the best developers can't always escape development hell. Tune in next time to see how Irrational couldn't save its next projects.
The bomb has been planted!